faculty in the division. We facilitate the recruitment, the appointment, retention, and promotion of faculty members across 4 basic science departments, 14 clinical departments, and 2 hybrid departments. And one of the ways in which we support our faculty is through informational workshops like this. So similar to past years, we've decided to split this event into 2 workshops, allowing us to focus on the different needs of our 2 groups of medical faculty, the clinical tracks faculty, who are the clinician educator and clinical tracks, and the academic tracks faculty, who are on the teaching scholar, clinician scholar, research scholar, and parens research tracks. The academic tracks faculty workshops will be held on November 18th, so next Tuesday. I'd like to thank and recognize the groups who've made this workshop possible today. First, the Office of Biomedical Faculty Administration, with a special shout out to Heather Robichaux, who did the heavy lifting to have this program come together, and also the Office of Continuing Medical Education. I'd also like to thank our panelists and breakout session presenters who have graciously given their time to share their wisdom and experiences. I also want to thank the Clinical Faculty Advisory Committee, or CFAC, for co-sponsoring this workshop. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Nitin Damle, Clinical Assistant Professor of Medicine, who is the chair of CFAC. And Nitin is going to speak about that committee, their work, and how they support our clinical faculty. So Nitin.
Thanks, Shelley. I'm the current, as Shelley said, I'm the current chair of the Clinical Faculty Advisory Committee, which represents I believe, about 2,000 clinical faculty members. So a significant number of folks that really fall under, our committee charge. And one of its charges is really the effective communication and collaboration, as it says here, between the medical school and its clinical faculty. And our committee is very diverse, has a group of individuals from various disciplines and settings, community-based physicians, academics, hospital and institutional affiliations. And I was just looking at the list, and we have 10 departments represented on our committee right now. So it's really an opportunity for people to talk about issues that are important to them within their department. Any questions or concerns or issues related to either the medical school or the faculty itself. And as Shelley said, we also facilitate the promotions workshop here and other teaching opportunities. So, but one of the other important functions that we have, if we can put up the slide that shows the members, Heather. There they are. Yep. So there's, as I said, 10 departments that are represented there. Some have more than one member, like pediatrics and medicine, but most of the departments are represented on this committee. And one of our important functions is to grant the Excellence in Teaching Awards to clinical faculty. And we usually receive around 30 or so nominations. Most of them are awarded, but we do go through a fairly rigorous screening process to make sure that everybody is truly eligible. And it really recognizes clinical faculty that demonstrate outstanding skills as educators. And nominations are forwarded from department chairs and from division directors. So we welcome your interest in participating with the committee. Contact your committee member from your department or myself. And if you're interested in joining the committee at some point, we'd be happy to consider that also. So I'll give this back to Shelley so we can move on to the workshop.
Great. So thanks so much, Nitin, and thanks again to CFAC for co-sponsoring this event, and more importantly, to all of the important work that you all do to support our clinical faculty. So before I begin my presentation, let me start with some logistics. The first hour of the workshop will be recorded, and that recording will later be available on the BMFA website. And I know that you're all going to want to see more of me in the future. I'm just kidding. As we proceed, please submit any questions that you have via the chat function directly to Alex Kelleher. Alex will be monitoring the site throughout the program, and she will be able to ask those questions of our panelists when we convene the panel. We'll start the program with a general overview of the promotions process, followed by the panel discussion, during which time there's going to be ample opportunity for our panelists to address the questions that you've submitted. At this time, I'm going to attempt to share my screen so that you can follow along with the PowerPoint presentation. This is always the moment of sheer terror. All right, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so once again, this is the faculty promotion workshop for clinical and clinician educator track faculty. Let's see, am I in the right mode? Just having trouble advancing it. All right, let me see. There. So the goals of this workshop are first to provide some basic information about our faculty tracks, the promotion dossier, the promotion process, and the timeline. I'd like to be able to dispel some of the myths that may be out there circulating, share promotion tips, and answer the questions that you might have. So for this workshop, we're going to be talking about the two tracks, the clinical track with the titling that is Clinical Professor of Department X. So that is the way the titles are designated for faculty in that track. And then the Clinician Educator track, where the titling is Professor of Department X, comma, Clinician Educator. So this pie chart really shows you the representation in the various tracks from our clinical departments. So if you look, our total is about 2,300 plus. And the biggest track is indeed the clinical track with nearly 1,000 faculty members in that track. Next in line is the Clinician Educator track with 760. And then the academic tracks here represented in this part of the pie chart are a much smaller piece of the pie. Perens research faculty represent 104 positions, teaching scholar 224, research scholar 159, and then pre-track is the track that academic track faculty are appointed to before they designate which of the other tracks that they're going to differentiate into. And then Clinician Scholar is our newest track, now with a total of 4 faculty members in that track. And there will be time in between the panel discussion and the breakout session if any of you have questions about the Clinician Scholar track, which, as I say, is our newest track. It is an academic track as well. So now moving on to the faculty track standards and criteria. So these are really sort of the criteria that we use, that the departments use to assess whether faculty are appropriate for a given rank in a track. So this relatively busy grid, maybe very busy grid, is to give you an idea first of, all of our tracks along the top row, and then the various criteria along this column on the left. The inside each of the cell is a designation NR, designates not required, R required. PC is positively considered, and PR is peer reviewed. So I'd like to direct your attention over to the yellow highlighted columns for the clinical track and the clinician educator track. So if you go across the row here, research is not required for either of those tracks. Grant funding likewise is not required. Scholarly productivity is positively considered for associate professors in the clinical track, but it is required for associate professors in the clinician educator track. So this is the major difference in the two tracks at that rank. Both tracks require a regional reputation. Educational leadership is not required, although certainly some of our clinician educators have educational leadership positions. Teaching, mentoring, and advising excellence is required for both tracks. Clinical contributions, obviously, are required for both tracks. Service contributions to the university, the med school, the department is positively considered. And contribution to the mission of our diverse and inclusive community is required for both of those tracks at the associate professor rank, actually at all ranks. And then if you have interest, you can review these slides on our website to see where the clinical track faculty requirements compare, how they compare to the other tracks. I don't know why this is doing this. It's just, okay, there we go. So this is at the full professor rank. Again, sort of direct your attention to the clinical and clinician educator tracks. And here, once again, there's no requirement for research, but at the full professor rank, scholarly productivity is required for the clinical track as it is for the clinician educator track. The difference here is that the bar is a little bit higher for clinician educators because they would have had this requirement at the associate professor rank. A national reputation is required for both at the professor level. There's no requirement for educational leadership. There is still a requirement for teaching, mentoring, and advising excellence. Clinical contributions are required. Service contributions are positively considered. And the contributions to the mission of the diverse and inclusive community are still required. So this is just another way of looking at this. And just to orient you, so these are, this is just for the clinical track, and this is breaking down between the associate professor and professor ranks. And what you'll see here is that where the row has a divider is where the requirements change from associate to full professor. So again, scholarship is positively considered at the associate professor rank for the clinical track, but it is required at the professor rank. The reputation requirement goes from a regional reputation at associate professor and a national reputation at the full professor rank. And then everything else remains the same. And I should have probably mentioned that another difference between the clinical track faculty requirements and the clinician educator are the number of hours of teaching and or service per year. And it's 100 of hours teaching and or service per year for clinical track and 200 hours for the clinician educator track. So this is a clinician educator track criteria. And here again, what you'll see is that where the row is divided is where the requirements change from associate to full professor. And the requirement for reputation changes from regional associate and moves up to national for full professor. Everything else remains the same for this track. So now we'll move on to the various components of the promotion dossier. And this slide sort of was more relevant when we actually had paper dossiers, and it sometimes felt as if there were that many pieces of paper, but now everything is electronic and it just seems far more manageable. So who is responsible for what in the promotion dossier? So the promotion dossier components, the candidate is responsible for some and the department is responsible for others. The candidate is responsible for an updated CV, for a personal statement, for documentation of their teaching hours, for evaluations, and for the candidate list of suggested referees. So these are the referees that you as a candidate would suggest be solicited for references. The department is responsible for the chair and chief letters of support. So division chiefs typically write a letter of support, as does the department chair. They're also responsible for the department promotions committee report, the sample letter that was sent to the referees, the actual referee letters that were received, so both those from the department list as well as those from the candidate list, and then evaluations in addition to those that the candidate may have provided. So the CV, there are always a lot of questions about the CV and what should be in the CV and in what format. So the very basic advice is to use the Brown format. It's available on the BMFA website, so you can find it there. It is at a very high level and with not a lot of specificity. So within that framework, that scaffolding, you are welcome to create your own subtitles, your own sort of areas of interest, of importance for you and documenting your work. And so the Brown format is really, as I say, just at a very high level of organization for the various components of your CV. Just my overall advice to you as you're putting your CV together is to try to make the reviewer's job as easy as possible. So there are going to be an awful lot of people who are going to be reviewing your CV, certainly your division chief, your department chair, the department promotion committee, also all of those referees that are being solicited for letters will look at your CV. So make it as easy for those people to review your CV as possible. And then ultimately, the members of the Committee of Medical Faculty Appointments and Promotions will be reviewing it. And we'll go into it, but there are some members of that committee who are not in medicine. They are from the campus-based department. We have somebody from chemistry on CMFA right now. So I'm not saying that you have to explain everything, but just think about the audience that will be reviewing it. So highlight your name on publications. That really helps people see where you are in the list of authors. If you do have grants, and you're not required to by any means in these tracks, but be sure to include the grant agency, your role on the grant, and the dollar amount. This is important for all of you. Please separate your presentations into local, regional, national, and international. And this is really important, and it's in your best interest to do this, both to make the reviewer's life easy, but also because there's some presentations that you may do locally, for instance, at Brown, but they are actually international conferences. So those presentations would be listed under international, even though they were held locally. Organize your professional organization activities with a listing of your role in that organization. That really helps reviewers see how you may have moved forward in the organization into leadership roles, from being a member to having more leadership. So be sure to do that. When you do start to draft your CV, get feedback from colleagues. Clearly get your feedback from your chief, the promotion committee, and your chair. But I think it's often very helpful to review your CV with somebody who was recently promoted, just to get a sense of how did they organize their CV, presuming that they were successful. The CV should also include your teaching activities. So record all of your teaching, advising, mentoring activities and the titles. List any advisees and mentees that you've had. Certainly include your role in a course or rotation. If you were a lecturer or you directed the course, include that. Include the dates, the numbers of and types of learners. So if you were teaching in a clinic, you want to talk about the learners who were in that clinic, and maybe medical students, residents, fellows, and sort of an idea of the numbers of learners in those activities. Certainly include any awards received. As Nitin mentioned, the CFAC is responsible for doing the Dean's Teaching Awards. One component of the Dean's Teaching Awards. So we take that very, very seriously in the review of the CV and the promotion. Include any scholarship that results from your teaching, advising, and/or mentoring, and then any curriculum that you may have developed. Because this actually, if you've developed curriculum, it actually speaks in many cases to scholarship if it's been disseminated in any way. Okay. So also include teaching, mentoring, and advising evaluations. So try to keep a file of your evaluations. Many of you are involved in teaching of medical students where your evaluations are on OASIS. You may be teaching in GME programs and using new innovations or eValue. Also include any evaluations that you may have had from invited presentations from advisees and mentees. And certainly ask program administrators for help. So sorry about that. I just went forward. Yep. Sorry. So clerkship directors or anybody who works in the clerkship coordinators who can help you, residency coordinators, fellowships, and the CME office may have evaluations for you as well. If you do research, be sure that you include any original publications that you had from those research activities. Include your research grants again with the grant agency, the award, the role in the grant, total dollar amount, and the inclusive years, and then any research trainees that may have been involved in those activities. The personal statement is, I would say it's an area where there are a lot of different opinions, perhaps, about what should go into the personal statement. But because I am doing this presentation, I can give you my opinion, and maybe the panelists can give you theirs if they have a differing opinion. But I think the personal statement is a place where you can tell the story of your career path. So it's more of a biographical essay. Certainly try to keep it brief, so 2 pages max. And that doesn't mean you decrease the font to, to 4 in order to get everything you want to say into it, but do try to keep it to 2 pages max. I think it's a good place where you can explain what might not be clear from your CV. So I think I would not suggest putting your CV to music, I call it, or putting your CV into prose, because then it's just something that somebody could have gotten from your CV and it's not additive. So try to explain what's not clear from your CV. Certainly, this is a place where you can help the reader understand who you are, what you do, what gives you joy in your career. And in doing so, remember your track. So if you're on a clinical track, you probably aren't going to be talking about research giving you the most joy in your career. So just remember what track you're on. Present your goals and your aspirations and how you hope to realize them, because promotion is just, a step along the way, and we're hoping that you will continue to do amazing things. So we'd like to hear about that. And again, remember your track and what your track really emphasizes and what the focus is. And then once again, it's like, real estate, location, location, location. Remember your track. So the diversity inclusion criterion, this is something that has been introduced over the last academic year. And the wording of it has changed somewhat. So I just want to give you the exact wording that we have adopted for our standards and criteria. And the wording is that individuals need to have demonstrated contributions to the research, clinical, teaching, and/or service missions of our diverse and inclusive community. And this is a requirement, as I said, for both ranks, for clinical and clinician educator tracks, but it's required for all tracks, in fact. Evidence of these contributions are probably best summarized in your personal statement, and/or you could do it as an optional section in your CV, but it is by no means a requirement to include a section on your CV. So what about the referee letters? So the purpose of the referee letters is to provide objective and unbiased assessment regarding your regional, national, or international reputation in your field. So the referees, as you're thinking about putting your referee list together, they must be at your promotion rank or higher. So if you're going for associate professors, they need to be associate or full. And if you're going for full, they need to be at full. And the referees may not know you specifically. They're provided with your dossier for their review. So they're reviewing your personal statement, your CV, and other materials. And that's, again, another reason to make sure your CV is something that is easy for them to review. So the promotion timeline can often feel like it takes a very long time. But I like to liken this to sourdough bread baking. There's the active part of it, and then there's the long period of waiting. And so promotion process, you're active at the beginning where you're putting your dossier together, but then there's a long period where things are going on in your department, where they're soliciting letters. And so it is a long overall timeline, but you are not active throughout all of it. So the steps in the promotion process start with you as the candidate and your department chair deciding if the time's right for your promotion. And in most departments, it starts even at the division level. You confirm your rank, your track to make sure that you're on the right track with your division chief or your department chair. You're then informed of the departmental deadlines, and you can start to begin your promotion documents, your dossier. In most departments, there's a preliminary departmental review, and then the promotion committee and/or the department chair inform you about going forward for promotion. So they give you the green light to put everything together and update your CV. The department then solicits referee letters for approved candidates. So once they get your candidate list and your materials, they will start to solicit referee letters. And this is the part that probably takes the most time for most departments. The department promotion committee then reviews the completed dossiers once they get those letters, and they recommend the candidate to the chair. At that point, the department submits the completed dossier to the Committee on Medical Faculty Appointments and Promotions, and it is then reviewed at CMFA, and the promotion is voted on at that point. So CMFA is comprised of 8 faculty members. All of the faculty on CMFA have to be at the full professor in the medical, academic, or campus-based tenured tracks, and each member serves a 3-year term. There are 5 members from the medical academic faculty in the clinical departments. There's 1 member from a biology department. There's 1 from a public health department, and then 1 from another university department that is not biology or public health. And as I say, right now we have someone from chemistry. The CMFA members review all senior level promotions and appointments in clinical departments. We meet throughout the academic year, so we meet every 2 weeks pretty much, except for some breaks over the holidays, every 2 weeks throughout the academic year. All members read every dossier, and they formulate questions for the department chair. The department chair comes to the committee meetings. They present your dossier, and they answer any questions that that have arisen during our conversations, and make any clarifications that are needed. So at that point, so we go from the department promotions committee and the chair. Once that happens, then it goes to CMFA. Whatever happens in CMFA is recommended to the Dean of Biology and Medicine. The provost then reviews the recommendations. It then goes to the president and finally to the corporation. You would be notified by the chair after the CMFA vote. So CMFA votes, and then I have a conversation with the chair about the vote and give permission for the chair to discuss that with you as a candidate for promotion, with the caveat that it still needs to go to the dean and the provost and the president before you would get a letter. So it's at the point where the president has approved it that you would get a letter in anticipation of the corporation approving the recommendation. And then the promotion goes into effect as of July 1st. So that concludes my general overview discussion. And as I said, the slides will be available on the BMFA website if anybody wants to review them. And then I think at this point we are going to move into our panel discussion. And again, I want to thank our panelists for presenting today and for sharing their wisdom and expertise around the promotions process. So I think I have to stop sharing my screen because I am going to let our panelists actually introduce themselves. So let me see, stop share. And there we are. We have our panelists. Excellent. So thank you all again for joining today. And I am going to start by asking Vilma to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Vilma Cortez Jasayan, and I am the manager of academic affairs here at BMFA. I review all your dossiers, read word by word, page by page. So I am your go-to girl.
Excellent. All right. And then Tony.
Hi, everyone. Tony Caldamone, pediatric urologist by trade with an appointment in Department of Surgery and in Department of Pediatrics. And I run the promotions committee for the Department of Surgery.
Great. And Tracy.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tracy O'Leary Tevio. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm the chief psychologist here at the Providence VA Medical Center. I'm the chair of the Department of Psychiatry and Human Behaviors Promotions Committee.
And Geraldine.
Hello, good afternoon. My name's Geraldine Maserlian. I am professor in pathology and laboratory medicine and chair of that promotions committee. My position is in as lab director of clinical chemistry at Care New England.
Great. So as you can see, our panelists have a lot of expertise around the promotions process from a number of different perspectives. And I really appreciate their contribution today. So I am going to kick it off before we start looking at the questions that we received through the chat by asking each of you to give maybe one tip that you would want to give faculty who are contemplating promotion. And I'm going to start with Geraldine to do that, if that's okay.
Okay, well, I'm ready for that question, even though you didn't give me a warning. But the number one tip for, I think that I would give you at this moment is the regional and national reputation, to think about working on that. And I know as busy clinicians, um, we're very focused on the hospital or the work that's being done with patients, et cetera. But you have to think for academic promotion about getting yourself, quote unquote, known. And this is going to be really important to meet that criteria, but also so that when people are asked to write a letter on your behalf, they may have heard of your work, they may have heard you speak. And what I like to suggest to people in this age of Zoom is reach out to your colleagues at other institutions, and ask them if you can give a lecture. That would count as an invited presentation. So you could do, I don't know, UMass, say somebody, a colleague at UMass, ask them to invite you to speak in the department in which you work, and give a presentation. That goes a long way for your national and or regional reputation, whatever required. The other tip, because this category is where I feel faculty often come up short, is the reputation category. The other tip is to get into leadership positions within organizations that you're already involved. So if I serve in clinical chemistry, if they're looking for committee members to review abstracts or to serve on a meeting organizing committee, sign up for those things. It speaks to your regional and national reputation, and that's probably the hardest, or the thing I see faculty struggle with the most.
Great, Geraldine. Thanks so much. I couldn't agree more. Tracy.
Thank you. So, a couple of thoughts. One is just to pick up on that point. Another opportunity is for whatever national or international conferences you normally attend. Um, Try to volunteer for some of the special interest groups, because those are great opportunities to get to know peers in the field who in turn could potentially be those letter writers for you, who would be familiar with your work but have no conflict of interest whatsoever and probably be very happy to write a letter for somebody like yourself. So that's another thought. Um, we in the Department of Psychiatry and Human Behavior just had our CV boot camp presentation last week. I'm not sure if anyone attended that who's here today, but we host that yearly. We've been doing that for a couple of years now. Can't underestimate how important it is to make sure that your CV is up to date and to really view your CV as a living document. So, in other words, it shouldn't be something you file away and check maybe once a year. You should be opening it, you should be updating it continuously, making sure you put down every single thing that you do, because sometimes we're asked to do things across different departments at Brown that you may have forgotten about, but certainly can count towards promotion. So please be sure to keep note of all of that. Um, as Shelley had mentioned before, that it's so important to get evaluations from the presentations that you provide, the didactics that you give, making sure that you have those in hand, encouraging your students, your trainees, your supervisees to provide feedback, written feedback in their formal evaluations of you. That is a hugely important part of the promotion process, and that's looked at very carefully, certainly by the promotions committee as well as by external letter reviewers too. So this is the point where really people can shine based on the evaluations that they get from their trainees. Um, and I think oh, and then the last thing would be in your CV, it's incredibly important to make sure. I think in the Brown CV format, it has a section called abstracts. That's where you actually want to divvy it up, between your international, national, and regional presentations, and make sure that you also have a section that is similar for any invited presentations that you have, because again, that's really crucial when it comes to promotion in the tracks.
Great advice. All right, Tony.
I think a lot of points have already been made, but I will add one that I think is often overlooked on the CV because it's something that you do just about every day and you don't realize it or think you should get credit for it, and that is mentoring. Mentoring is a valued part of what you do and what your responsibility is as a faculty person. And you do it just about every single day, but don't realize it. And it could be in the form of career advising. You could be helping a medical student or a resident prepare for a grand round presentation or talk, or it could be part of their remediation team for a particular resident who needs remediation, or maybe it's just sort of life balance, how you balance medicine with the family life, whatever it might be. And it's awfully difficult to go back and document it once you haven't kept track of it. So it's the type of thing that I think is best to keep track of along the way. And as Tracy had mentioned, keeping that CV as a living document, I think the mentoring part of it is good to do as well, and indicate who that person is and what the status of that person is and what the mentoring type might have been. Is a 5-10 word piece of information that I think can go a long way and that we often overlook. The other thing, if I could say one more thing, you'll notice on the table that Shelley had put up regarding scholarly productivity, there is a difference between the type of scholarly productivity that's looked for in the clinician educator track and in the clinical track compared to the full-time academic faculty. It does not necessarily have to be peer-reviewed type of publication. It can be curriculum development, white paper, documents, anything along those lines are considered valid scholarly productivity in the more clinical tracks.
Great point. And yeah, I should have mentioned that. And thank you for doing so, Tony. It's including, things like chapters, clinical guidelines that may be disseminated in some way as well. So it's a broad umbrella of scholarship, certainly for clinical and clinician educator faculty. All right, Vilma, your go-to girl.
Thanks, Shelley. I think to tie all those comments up, I would really
ensure that you follow the Brown CV template, follow the order to ensure the committee is able to easily follow your accomplishments, but also remember that you're able to add sections or remove sections that are not there. Everything is on our website, so go check out our website, and then we have the dossier guideline, we have the standards and criteria, so that's a really good resource as well.
Great. Thank you, Vilma. And Vilma does review all of those CVs and gives feedback to the departments where needed. So great. So I am now going to introduce Alex Kelleher, who is our Director of Biomed Faculty Administration and who has been monitoring the chat for questions. Alex.
Yes, I have. And people are coming in with some wonderful questions, some that we've touched upon a little bit already, but I think that we can tease out some more detail from. So let's start with scholarly productivity. A question came in about whether or not there is a requirement for first versus senior authorship. Are they considered equivalent in importance or different? So looking for a little bit deeper of an explanation there.
So who would like to take that one on?
I can say, I think they're equally important, quite honestly. I don't think it matters. I think it's more significant if you're the senior author in some of these cases, because that obviously means that you've mentored your other authors, particularly your first author, in putting this together. So I think that might have a little bit of an advantage, but I don't think there's any significant difference between the two. I think they're both highly regarded.
Yeah, there's no requirement for first or senior author on these tracks.
It is interesting that I know that a lot of times, getting to Tony's point, the committee is looking at, oh, are the first, second, whatever, or authors, are they trainees? And you might want to indicate that,
Right.
because that is very powerful that you've actually mentored trainees in publications. So yeah.
Good point.
All right, Alex.
All right. A couple of questions speaking about advisees or mentees, and I'm going to try and group them together, these questions. So to start things off, and Tony, you spoke to this a little bit about who you can qualify in your CV, in your dossier, who qualifies as an advisee or a mentee. And then let me find the next one that was about, oh, and does mentoring to APPs need to be mentioned in your CV for promotion? So advanced practice practitioners.
They have to be at Brown. They have to be a student, everybody. I mean, what counts is Brown mentoring, Brown advising, Brown teaching. So sometimes we get, other people who have, maybe have roles at other institutions with other students or whatever, but it's Brown based activities. So that's one thing I can add,
Tracy,
I
did you
think,
want to add? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, certainly, in terms of the hours required, it would have to be a Brown trainee or student. But however, I think it speaks to one's regional reputation if you're
Mhm.
asked to serve as a mentor or supervisor for other disciplines that may not be at Brown. So I think I would still encourage people to list that and maybe highlight some of the reasons why you were invited to serve in that
Mhm.
role, which again suggests a regional, perhaps even a national reputation.
Right.
And don't forget junior faculty. Oftentimes you're called upon to help out with a new faculty appointee and guide them through things for the first couple of years or so. That's certainly very valuable and rewarded.
Mm.
Totally agree. Excellent.
All right, next question. Do oral presentations and posters at conferences count?
Always, they always count.
But they
Yes.
count as abstracts, not as invited presentations.
Right.
We sometimes get that mixed up. Even if you submit an abstract to a meeting, a society meeting, sometimes you'll get an oral session. That's still an abstract. It's an oral abstract as opposed to an invited presentation where another institution or organization has specifically asked you to come and speak. There is a specific invitation. So they definitely count as abstracts are a scholarship. So they definitely count.
Yeah,
But
and I
they,
think you can have like a separate section for invited presentations,
yes,
and
you
then,
should.
yeah,
You
that's
should
how we
have
do
it.
it. Yes,
Yes,
yes.
you have a section named abstracts, and you present those, whether they're a poster or an oral. It doesn't matter. They're an abstract at a meeting, and then you have a section on invited presentations. Correct. We do the same.
Yeah, and that's what the Brown template would suggest. Everyone. Great, great.
All right.
All right.
Also with presentations, how does the committee define a regional versus a national presentation?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not the location of where the presentation is, it's who the audience is, I think,
The
really.
audience.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's-
exactly. That's what defines who you're speaking to and how you list that, as Shelley had
Mhm.
mentioned earlier in her presentation. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that people get hung up on sometimes.
Mhm.
But and the other part of it is Rhode Island a region? I'm a Rhode Islander. It is a region. Of course it is. It's huge. But if it's outside of Brown, it may be considered regional, even if it's Rhode Island. So we
Yeah.
had that conversation yesterday. So yeah.
All right, a couple of timeline questions. Are there any requirements for how long somebody must be an assistant professor before they get promoted, be considered for promotion up to associate? How much time one needs to be an associate before being considered for full professor? And what if a candidate has experience and time as a faculty member at another institution? Does that time count?
I'll start with the last part of it and let others weigh in on the other parts. But if you've been a faculty member at another institution in rank, we count all of those years in rank. So if you came to Brown having been an assistant professor for 3 years at another institution, we count those 3 years. And so if you were to come up in another 3 years, it wouldn't seem early. It would be 6 years in rank. But I'll let the panelists talk about how long somebody should be in rank based on your departmental experience. Tracy, are you going to talk? Or are you are you sighing?
This is a tough one. Yeah. I think generally speaking, we try to keep our eye on our faculty who are at the 6-year mark when it comes to moving up to associate. Every so often we have a faculty member who's been doing a ton of work, for whatever reason, and they may be, particularly suited to moving up. But generally speaking, it's around the 6-year mark. I would say that that's pretty much the case for the Department of Psychiatry.
Yeah, we're exactly the same in surgery. That's sort of the benchmark that we use. But as you say, we have some flexibility, and we like to reward people who do extraordinary amount of work for whatever reasons, and fulfilling all the metrics very, very early on. I think they should be rewarded
Mhm.
for that, and I think that should be noted by the other faculty members too, quite honestly.
Right.
Yeah, I
And-
agree. Go ahead, Geraldine, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that Shelley has spoken often about you should be promoted to associate professor by 7 years or so. And Shelley has spoken often about giving extensions if you need them for, you know, be- parenting, or if there's been life circumstances that have made it difficult for you to go up for promotion by year 7, then you know she's offered an open door to discuss that with you. So
Yeah, I just want to clarify though that the term limits only apply to the teaching scholar, research scholar, and clinician scholar track. So
Ah.
for clinical and clinician educators, they can go up anytime and they don't need to ask for extensions. So it's a little
okay.
a little bit easier. But what I would say is that one of the things about coming up early, first of all, I agree that there are people who are just rock stars and they should come up early. because they have met all of the criteria, but you need to meet all of the criteria. And so that's, sort of the bottom line. The other part that becomes difficult where scholarship is required, and not so much for clinical and clinician educator, but if you come up really early, you might not have shown that you're continuing to have some scholarly productivity. So that's the only caveat, but I think people should come up when they meet the criteria. Yep. Great.
One last question, and I will acknowledge that we've had some great questions come in. We're not getting to all of them this afternoon, so please bring these questions that we haven't had a chance to answer now into the breakout sessions that are going to follow our panel. But the last question that everybody always has every year is, how long does this actually take? How long does it take to get promoted?
A year. Takes about a year from beginning to put your materials together, giving the committee time to solicit letters, going to CMFA. I'd say an academic year. If you get your materials ready in the fall, you'll know your promotion could be active by July, so 10 months.
Yeah, Vilma, what do you say? Just I'm curious because you're on that end of things where you're seeing the department put the dossiers together and
I think from our standpoint, it would probably take like from our team reviewing, CMFA reviewing it, goes to the provost and the president and all these other processes. I would say like 6 months just for us to get a letter, and obviously that's future dated.
right.
Right.
So people are
And-
getting letters now that they're promoted and it's effective July 1st, 2026. But I think a lot of departments start to put promotion dossiers together in the spring, not infrequently, and then solicit referee letters over the summer, and then tee up, to be on the CMFA calendar sometime in the fall or the spring for an effective date in July. But I think it varies by department somewhat. So Alex, we could, if there were a lot of questions in one category, we could go a little bit into the breakout session hour, but not much. But if there's something that seems that it would be best addressed by the panel, you could float it.
There's one very new kind of question that I think is an interesting one, and I'm guessing, that we have at least one person or a couple people in this boat with the new arrival of some hospitals that are based out in Massachusetts, so St. Anne's and Morton, and there aren't any Brown residents who are rotating there. How do resident teaching hours, or how are teaching hours satisfied at those institutions, or just institutions in general where there are not necessarily residents rotating consistently?
I might be able to address that just because I've been in some discussions about those individuals having faculty appointments, and there are opportunities for them to teach medical students. And there will probably be more as we go forward. So if they're interested in a faculty appointment, they may look to what sort of opportunities there are to teach, for instance, in the doctoring course, to host a student in longitudinal integrated clerkship, to go to their departments to see what other kinds of teaching there is. So the teaching and or service doesn't have to be just with residents and fellows. It can certainly be with Brown, with medical students. People
And
agree
also
with
to-
that?
Yes.
And I'd also love to
Totally.
expand the question a little bit, just teaching in general. What qualifies as teaching overall? How do you achieve those 100 hours, 200 hours of teaching and service?
I'm sure our panelists have seen everything.
Yeah, well, I think that's the answer, just about everything. I think any encounter you have with medical students, with residents, with mid-level providers who are in the Brown system, all counts. It may just be rounds. It may, for our department, be in the operating room, it may be advising in the emergency room, wherever all that, or the mentoring, that's all counted as well as teaching hours. So I would say be as inclusive as possible.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
service also counts, and that's why it's teaching and or service. So even if you're doing committee work, for example, if you're on CFAC,
Right,
that
right.
counts toward the 100 hours.
Yeah, I was also going to mention in terms of clinical supervision, certainly in our department, there's a requirement for like an hour of supervision for each trainee per supervisor. But if you think about it, there's so much on the fly supervision that you likely do in terms of reviewing
Mhm,
notes,
mhm.
documentation, signing or co signing things that it easily probably is doubled what you think it is. So just bear that in mind because I think sometimes people think they're not doing enough, but they're if we count up how much clinical supervision they provide, it's usually quite a bit.
Try to
Yeah.
keep track of it. It's hard, I know, but just a quick daily note or something, or weekly, just try to keep track of it for a couple weeks and then you could probably extrapolate from there. But
And even if you're having email correspondence with
Mhm,
students and trainees, it
mhm.
all counts. So, um,
Yes,
so be more inclusive if you can.
yes,
Okay, great.
yes.
All right. So Alex, are we good?
We're good. There's still more questions out there. I could throw one kind of more concrete question as we wrap up. Um, how likely is it that somebody who goes up for promotion that they are successful?
Great question.
So in our department, um, we do a lot to not let people go up unless we feel they'll be successful. So we try to be the devil's advocate and really scrutinize very closely the materials. Um, because once we solicit external letters, we want them to be positive. We want the external reviewers to see the candidate in the best light. So we want to make sure that we've put together the materials and that the candidate has clearly met the criteria so that after that fact, once referees are solicited and the dossier moves on to CMFA, that there's a very strong likelihood of success. So it's harder at the beginning, but the intent is that it will sail on past that.
Yeah. And Vilma, you know the actual numbers. So there are very, very few.
Very few.
Very, very few. So the departments do an exceptional job at making sure that people are going to be successful. And, we really appreciate that because the last thing we want to do at CMFA at the medical school level is to not approve a promotion. And I think that's probably a good note to end the panel discussion on is that all of the people here on this panel are working very, very hard to ensure your success and to support you through the process. So we're not trying to be gatekeepers. Everybody wants you to succeed. So I would say enter into the whole process with knowing that people
Yes.
are really going to be advocating for you. And if they turn you down at the department level, it's really to be sure that you're ready and you will be successful. So great. Well, now I would like to thank our panelists so much for sharing your experience. It's been great. And so now we are going to move into the second part of this workshop. As I said before, the recording will be available on the BMFA website. The breakout sessions will not be recorded. So we really want you to be able to ask your questions in a very candid way and not have it be in a recording on our website. So between now and the breakout in going into we're going to have a little bit of a break, a 5-minute break, so that if people have questions about what breakout session they should go into, if they have questions about their track, or if anybody has a question about the clinician scholar track. I will stay on and not go into a breakout session right away to answer any of those questions. Likewise, if anyone's having any technical difficulties, just stay in the main Zoom room. Our breakout session facilitators are for the clinical track session, Gary Bubley and Keith Callahan, and I want to thank them because they have been doing this for a very, very long time, and I really appreciate them doing this every year. And our clinician educator track session, it's Melissa McNeil and Stephen Murnoff who'll be facilitating that session. So as I say, we will be breaking out into those sessions after a brief break, although I guess you can move into those rooms as soon as you're